Hi everyone. So in this video we are going to discuss about dynamic network address translation or dynamic NAT. So in previous video we studied the static network address translation. So in the static network translation, so we define that we have some inside network and we have outside network. The same is the case here because in network address translation we need to enable our router to translate the private IP addresses to the public IP addresses. So private IP addresses are only for the private use, for the private organizations. And when those private organizations want to send something to the internet or to the outside network, then they need a public IP address. And the static one, we define this manually that which public IP address will be mapped to which private IP address. So by this, we manually configured it, but today we are going to configure the router to do it dynamically. So for that, this is the actually initial configuration, so we don't need this one. So we have these IP addresses, private IP addresses which assign to these PCs, and these routers on these interfaces we have given these IP addresses. So by using this set of commands, we can configure the IP addresses on every interface of the router. So we need to change the name. So we discussed this one, that how to configure these individual interfaces. And if there is any confusion, then we have some other video on how to configure the interfaces of the router. That will be easier for you. So anyway, so now we have to define in this lab the dynamic mapping of the inside local addresses to outside inside global addresses. Inside local to inside global, or maybe from private IP addresses to the public IP addresses. So these private IP addresses are inside local and these are inside global. And for that, we need to configure this router, and both of these routers have also been enabled, or they have been configured for this default route and for the static route. So this static route command has been used on this router, and default route command has been set to this one. And in this command we have said that if the traffic from this network is going for this network, which is 200.3.2.0, then this router should forward that traffic to the next hop. That next hop is basically 172.20.0.1. So 172.20.0.1. So let's jump into this router. So this is router, and we have to configure this router to dynamically map the private IP addresses to public IP addresses. So for that, we need to go to global configuration mode. And in the global configuration mode, we can use a command that is this one. So this is IP net inside, and that is source list one pool newbie. So for static, we manually configured from private IP address to the public IP address, but for dynamically, we need some additional configuration. So first we need to define the private IP addresses which needs to be translated. And for that, we use access list. So we use a standard access list, and for that, we are going to define the standard access list which will actually filter out the IP addresses which we have to translate, or which needs to be translated. For that, if you remember, we have a standard access list, and the standard access list we have numbers, maybe 1, and then we say we want to permit some traffic, and then in the permit we have to give the IP address of the network. So this is the IP address of the network which we'll be using. So that is 192.168.10.0. So these are the IP addresses which we want to translate. So by using this access list, we want to filter out those IP addresses. So we are using this command. And then let's say what this command needs. This command needs the wildcard mask or wildcard bits. So for that, that is opposite of the subnet mask. So we use this wildcard mask there and we press enter. So there is some problem here. So that is from this one we missed 10, and now hopefully this will work. Yes, this is working. So we have defined an access list whose number is 1, and that access list will actually permit the packets having this source IP addresses. It means these all IP addresses we have allowed them to be translated by this router, and then we need to define the pool. So this time actually we are not using the manual configuration, but we are actually dynamically assigned. So we have to define the pool, and then router will decide that which private IP address will be mapped to the public IP address. So we just need to define the pool, and for that in the same global configuration mode we have this command IP net, and then we have this pool. So you can see pool, define pool of addresses, and in this pool we have to use the start IP address. So start IP address in this case, these are the public IP address 203.3.2.1. So these three IP addresses which we'll be using. So the start IP address is 200.3.2.1, and end IP address is 200.3.2.3, and then it is asking for the, so we made somehow the mistake maybe in using this one. So yeah, so we didn't give actually the name of the pool. Sorry, we need to give the name of the pool. So that is the name of the pool. So IP net pool newbie. This is the name of the pool which we will be using in that command. So see, pool list, and then the pool is newbie. So we created the pool of IP address name is newbie. Now we have this start IP address and IP address, and now let's see what's asking. It's asking for net mask. So net mask, and the net mask for this one is, this is class C. So for this one, so these all IP addresses are in this class C. Maybe we use 255.255.255.0 and press enter. So it means we made some mistake there. So what is the mistake? Let's see. Here this is net mask, sorry, spelling mistake was there, net mask, and then 255.255.255.0. Press enter, and we define the pool here. So yeah, these are pool, and we have also defined the access list. Now this is the time to use this command which will define the dynamic mapping. So for that, we again there in the global configuration mode we say IP net, and then we say inside, and then we have source. So source IP address will be translated, and then we have access list number. So we have used the list, and the number is 1, and then we can actually, I'm getting help by using question mark. So now we have pool, and then we will give the name of the pool. So if you remember, newbie was the name of the pool we defined, and that's it. And overload is something which we'll use in the next video, but at the moment this is over, and we define the dynamic mapping on this router. So now after this point, if any request from this private side of the network or from the inside network will come, and if that traffic has to go to outside network, then this router will translate those private IP addresses to the public IP addresses, or maybe inside local to inside global addresses. But still we have to define these interfaces, that which interface of this router will be the inside part, will be on the inside part of the network, and which part and which interface will be in the outside part of the network. So this is G0/0 is the inside, and G0/1 is in the outside. You can see here this one. So let's go to interface, that is G gigabit Ethernet 0/0, and then we say IP net inside, and the second interface, that is interface, and see interface G0/1, and this will be our outside interface. Press enter. Now we are done with all the configuration which we need to enable dynamic network address translation on this router, that's router R1. So now it means all these three private IP addresses will be dynamically assigned some of the IP addresses from this public one, and so it means now it should work. And actually we somehow discussed in more details about these all setup of this network in the previous video when we configured the static network address translation. So I would recommend you to go through that video if you feel some confusion or some difficulty. Anyway, let's verify this one. So first we can see here like show IP and net and then translation. So at the moment there is no translation, but when some of the user will send some request, for example from this PC we want to see the contents of this HTTP server, so we can go to that PC and then desktop and browser, and then we will give an IP address of this HTTP server, that is 172.3.2.1, and press enter, and you can see we reached there. So it means this translation worked, and now we can see the translation. Now you can see one translation has been done by the router, and the router is going to mention are going to detail giving us the detail. So protocol used was TCP, and inside global address was this, and inside local address was this. So inside local address is our private IP address of the PC who made the request. So you can see 192.168.10.1. This is inside global, and the outside global is this one. So from this pool, they selected the first IP address which was available, and then outside local and outside global are the IP addresses of this HTTP server. In this way, we actually verified that this is working. And for example, if this PC, if you want to ping this PC, maybe from this PC, so we want to ping a PC which is on the right hand side, that's 172.3.2.2. so ping 172.3.2.2, press enter, and let's see if it's working. So we are pinging this computer from the left hand side. You see it's working, and we can see the translation here again. So this time you can see this is the inside local address. Inside local address is 192.168.10.3, and this is the inside global address, and this inside global address, this time the second IP address, public IP address, was available in the pool that has been assigned to that one. So it means now the second public IP address has been assigned to the third computer, but in manual assignment this was not like that. But you can see now this is selecting dynamically. It means second in the row has been assigned to a private IP address that is third in that row. So this is the proof of dynamic mapping which is done by this router R1. And yes, and I hope this was a bit helpful for you, and thank you very much for your time, and I would suggest you to practice this on your own for better understanding. And in the next video we will discuss about port address translation, and I hope to see you in that video as well. Thank you.